Thank you for tuning in to Koppen with Comic. I'm Brian Koppen. We're with comic Michael Regilio. Michael Regilio, how the hell are you?
I'm damn good. How are you?
Doing good. Thank you so much for coming on. I follow you everywhere. I mean, everybody can go to your website, michaelregiliocomedy.com, but also Twitter. That's the big time. That's where I'll be retweeting all your funny stuff from Michael Regilio 1. But on Instagram, you're the big time. You got that, and YouTube. You got Michael Regilio.
I'm the one and only, which I'm not. There's a crazy amount of Michael Regilios out there. Who'd have thunk it?
Yeah, what the fuck is up with that? What's the ethnicity of Regilio such that Michael is the common first name?
Well, it is Italian, and apparently Regilios all named their firstborn son Michael because there's a bunch of us out there.
Okay.
But yeah, I had a guy reach out to me at one point, and which was a hilarious question. He just writes to me. He's like, "Hey, are we related?" I'm like, "I don't know." His last name was Regilio, though. I'm like, "You're the one reaching out to me. Maybe you do some research and find out if we're related first." But it turns out I did do some research, and I had to write back to him, and I was like, "You actually, turns out, are a member of my grandfather's secret other family."
No.
Yeah.
No, oh, that's hilarious. Oh my God, you're doing 23andMe to help this guy with his journey. I mean, it's going to take him all lifetime long to track down all the Regilios, I guess, even the Michael Regilios.
The Michael Regilios. There was a Nick Regilio who played for the Texas Rangers.
Okay.
And then, amazingly, there is a famous boxer out of the Netherlands whose first name is Regilio, and his name is Regilio Tour, Turr, with some umlauts thrown in.
Oh, my Lord.
And he has a men's clothing store called Regilio's in the Netherlands. And I was on a rock tour in the Netherlands, and only in the Netherlands, particularly this was the late 90s, before, you could buy marijuana anywhere in Los Angeles like you can now. Only in the Netherlands in the 90s could you forget to go to the store named your last name.
Well, I mean, dude, you won't have to work too hard to be the biggest Regilio out there because you're bi-coastal. I mean, you're hanging out with Todd Mondesi and the crew, man. Tell me about that story. Well, first, what's going on? Like, what projects do you have coming up? This is going to come out tomorrow. So what big shows you got coming up that you're excited about?
Oh, I'm excited about all my shows because I love telling the jokes from the stage. I don't care if the stage is the corner of a cafe or a Chinese restaurant, which I've done.
Nice. Have you done a laundromat yet? I've heard that's another Chinese restaurant-esque.
No, I haven't done that one, but there used to be the upstairs of a Chinese restaurant in Los Angeles that people would do, and it was pretty crazy. Is
that the rickety stage?
No, it was called. God,
I mean, no, meaning they said the stage was like. I mean, at one point there was a stage that was kind of like a surfboard where it just kind of moved, but I guess that's a different one.
I mean, in LA, I'm sure you know this. People do stand up absolutely everywhere. People do it in their living rooms, in cafes, in restaurants, in shops. I mean,
yeah, John Moskowitz, I think he was out there for a bit. He might be back in New York City now, but he turned his carport into like an open mic. John Moskowitz.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, there's a famous open mic called like Garage Behind Food for Less. And that's the one I've never done. I feel like I've done every open mic in LA, but that was the one that was like on Friday nights at like 11 p.m. And I was always like, you know what? I'm going to skip the Garage Behind the Food for Less.
But now you might be missing out. The FOMO is huge with Garage Behind the Food for Less.
Yeah, of course.
Tell me like the bi-coastal nature of just what has you able to kind of fly all over the world. You're doing rock tours in Europe. You're doing Todd Mondesi show in New York, and you're in LA currently.
I am in LA currently. Well, I am from LA, and I moved to LA to play the rock music. I actually moved to LA to do stand-up and play rock music. I went to Berklee College of Music where I studied guitar. Okay. And I wanted to move to LA, and I was like, dude, I want to do it all. I love comedy. I want to try comedy. I want to start a band. I want to do it all. And I started a band when I got here that started doing well instantly, and it put my plans to do comedy on hold for about 10 years.
Okay, are you allowed to say the band, or is it irrelevant?
I mean, it's kind of irrelevant, but yeah, the last band that I was in that I was really proud of was called Useless Keys. We got a ton of radio play. We were heavy Nirvana meets Pink Floyd-esque. I also have a record I did with Steve Albini, who produced Nirvana and all those bands. Sure. That's called The Dark Matters. You can find that on Spotify. I'm real proud of that one too.
Oh, good. Anything with Steve Albini. Did you record with him in Chicago?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, we went to Electric Audio, which is the name of his studio. I mean, to get off on comedy for just 1 second there, it
Yeah.
was so cool because you get to live in the studio. He has an apartment above the studio.
No.
And for one, Steve tells you that the recording session ends when you say the recording session is over. He's
Uh,
like, I start to fade around 23 hours, but if things are still cooking, we're still going. We go
wow.
until while the magic is happening, we do it. We cut
Wow.
the whole thing live. And the best, coolest thing that I've never seen had a studio do before, which was you stay in an apartment above the studio. And after the session was done, he's like, I'm going to leave everything on, all the mics on, all everything on. If you guys want to come down at 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, and just rehearse and get ready for the next day, go for it. And,
Wow.
who can sleep when you're recording with Steve Albini? So we did it. We went down at like 3 in the morning. We got started jamming on the songs. The headphones were all still up. The amps were still on. I mean, this
And
guy really is for the artist.
but that's cool because it's kind of the opposite. I just watched the Sound City documentary, and it's just like, it just sounds so expensive for anything other than digital. So the fact that what Steve Albini's allowing you to kind of record all the time is because it's digital and it's costing him nothing, right?
No, just the opposite. He doesn't have a single computer anywhere in the studio.
So,
Everything's to tape. Everything's
so
to
he's just
tape.
ruining all that tape. Is tape cheap? I thought it's expensive. I guess not.
No, it is expensive. That's the
Okay.
thing. And this is what,
Wow.
and we're so off the comedy thing, but this is what makes it so great because if you record, you listen back to the take, and if that ain't it, you tape over it.
Ah,
There's no safety net with digital music. You record, you go, it's pretty good. We'll hang on to that one. See if maybe you want to hang on to it. You can't fix anything. There's no
right.
digital fixing. There's no pitch correction. There's nothing. You have to nail it one time as a band and nail it right. And it just raises the stakes and it makes it so much better. And he won't let you play to a click track. You've got to have good time. You've got to play well. You've got to sing in tune. You've got to do it all. You've got to be a real musician to record with this guy. And it made me raise my game in a way that like I will forever be grateful to him for it.
But it's like, say, like if you told him I didn't come in last night, he would have been like, okay, we can tape over that, right?
Yeah,
That's what
well, I
you're
mean,
saying. When it's tape, you could tape over it once, right?
yeah,
Or
you
whatever.
can tape
Okay.
over it a bunch of times.
Yeah.
I mean, it does
Right.
degenerate after a while, but
Okay.
yeah, you just keep doing takes, and every time that you say that ain't it, you tape over it, and that take is gone forever. There's no going back to it. There's no saying, 3 times ago was actually pretty good.
Yeah.
Nope.
Ah, okay. Because I was thinking, if it's costly, it would just come out of your ass. But if you're allowed to tape over it, if nothing happened that night, that makes sense. But yeah, so I have a guitarist too. So you'll hear at the beginning of our episode, it's introduced by our music, me and my buddy. We came to New York to play music, and so he's one of these guitar shredders. And so it's a lot of like, he opened for Steve Vai. He won a big guitar contest. So he's one of these guys who just plays 1,000 notes a second and things like that. And there's 15 overdubs now because he's like harmonizing with himself 10 times and stuff. And so we also had our musical aspirations. So I think there's probably some similarity between comedy and New York as far as the type of people that it attracts.
Of course. I mean, it's the same spirit, which is I want to contribute creatively. I always
Yeah,
say that the creative itch, I don't mind scratching it anyway. Like
good.
it's the creative itch, it seems to be universal with me. Any way I can scratch it feels good. I'm not particular in that way.
Good. Yeah, we're in a Pixies cover band right now, so I'll be going to Astoria Soundworks over the weekend and banging out some Pixies songs. So that's a Steve Albini band too, I think.
Of course, yes, Surfer Rosa. That was one of my favorite Steve Albini records.
All right, well, real quick, tell me about like how the hell, you're out there in LA. You went to LA to play music and do comedy. At what point did you find yourself in New York City? Just when you kind of had your act honed, you just kind of came out here and
Yeah, I
toured a
just had
bit?
some. I did. I got some great opportunities. I was doing pretty well in LA. I was getting put out. The Improv here has a bunch of satellite clubs. They'd sent me out a few times to do residencies in Tahoe, where you live for 6 nights in the hotel there, which is super cool.
Oh, cool.
You perform every night in the casino. Really hones your chops. And as COVID started to go into full lockdown, I started doing online open mics. We all did. We all started doing the Zoom mics. And it occurred to me, and I'm sure it occurred to a number of other people, although it didn't seem to occur to any of my friends in LA, why am I doing Zoom mics with my friends in LA? Why
Yes.
don't I do Zoom mics from every city in the world and get to know other comics?
Yeah.
And I did. And I just really connected with the New York scene. I mean, really connected with it.
Why
And
do you think that is?
I don't know. I mean,
Just because they
it
were
has.
hustlers, they were on the mics with you too. I mean, they were trying to do LA mics too, and yeah, a lot of people were just like, "Hell, why am I not doing things internationally even?"
Absolutely. I did mics in Ireland. I did mics out of London. Different scenes have different styles. And I think there is something to, if I'm just being totally honest, I think there's something to people seeing you when you're more honed, when you're sharper.
Okay.
And, you know, I came up in the LA scene and all the comics know me in the LA scene and they saw me as a developing comic. Whereas in New York, these comics, they got to see me, a guy that had really put in the hours and really put in the time.
Okay.
And that was their first impression of me. And I think that I connected with a bunch of them. They were super sweet. And then this opportunity came up where my wife, who's getting her PhD in philosophy,
Okay.
had to teach at Temple University for one semester.
Okay.
Temple's a relative hop, skip, and a jump, or at least I convinced myself it was a relative hop, skip, and a jump to New York. And man, I spent a lot of time in the car. Let me
So
tell you.
how long was it? How long was that hop, skip, and a jump?
It was about a 2.5 to 3 hour hop to New York and about, you know, an hour and a half jump back at 3 a.m.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
And so yeah, but what you were able to kind of do actually in-person shows during the pandemic then?
No, this was
Okay,
starting in September. So I mean,
Okay.
who the line that delineates the beginning and the end of the pandemic is a very blurry one. So you
Okay.
tell me, was that pandemic or not? I
Was
don't know.
September 21?
September 21, yeah.
Sure, yeah. Were you doing outdoor shows? Were you doing Central Park or the Tiny Cupboard? Where were you at?
I did Gotham, I did Tiny Cupboard, I did a bunch of shows at Eastville. I actually had my own show at Eastville. I had
cool.
a monthly show there.
How the fuck do you swing that? Do they just are they just kind of, you know, yeah, I'll give you a show if you can put this many people in the seats?
More or less. I mean, I approached him and I said, look, I've done this before. I've produced a bunch of shows in LA before. Give me a shot. And he was nice enough to give me a shot. I got Judy Gold as my headliner for the first show, and Al Lubell for my second. And so, yeah, and it was super fun. But yeah, so I spent all my time in the car driving from Philly to New York because God bless Philadelphia. God bless it. It's just not the scene New York is. If you're going to be on the East Coast, it was worth the time in the car to be in New York. And I was connecting with New York comics. I was making friends with New York comics. A couple of New York comics were putting me up at their place and booking me on shows and helping me out. And I felt blessed. And to be honest with you, man, I miss it. I really miss it.
Okay, so yeah, who are some of the comics that you really kind of connected with, if you can say? Can you just mention a handful or no?
Well, Adam Mueller was a guy that I met on the Zoom mics, and he kind of put me up on a few of his shows and introduced me to a bunch of people. But Sean Gibbs, do you remember him? He
was with. Does he hang with Jeff Greenspan? Or no, he was hanging with Sean Gibbs. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I haven't had him on yet.
Well, he had a Zoom mic, and he was kind enough to put me up at his place, and he was going out of town a bunch of times, and he would just let me stay at his place in Brooklyn.
Okay.
And so that's
amazing.
It was so amazing.
Airbnb in Brooklyn is probably, I stay in a hotel right now, but Airbnb is just not much cheaper. So I can imagine how much you would have paid in a nicer, in an okay, decent part of Brooklyn.
I know, and he had a nice place with 2 roof decks, and yeah, I felt like I had arrived, man. I really did. I got to do Greenwich Village Comedy Club. I did a bunch of stuff in the parks, like you said, which was so fun. That's fun. Cool. I got to do both the roof of Tiny Cupboard and the venue itself on a couple occasions.
I think it's closing. I think they're having problems with their lease or whatever. Yeah, so I mean, and so you hooked up with Todd Mondesi, and you had the biggest experience known to man. Tell me about Hurricane Ida.
Hurricane Ida. So yeah, I hooked up with Todd. He put me on his show, and I look back and I can't believe that this didn't occur to me. Okay. Like, all the news is saying we're going to get hit with a mega storm tomorrow, man. Mega storm. I said, you know what? I don't care. I'm going for it. And I drove from Philadelphia to Brooklyn.
Okay.
We went to do the show. And by the time it was showtime, and this was in a basement, the rain was coming down so hard. Basement. I'm the out of town guy. Okay. So they give me what is usually the less desirable slot, which is the first slot. Okay. Turned out to be the only slot of the night. So I get to do my 10 minutes, and the second I finish, the bartender at this place says, "Everybody's got to move to the front of the room. We got water coming in. We got water coming into the club." And you look back, and it's turning into a lake at the back of the room, man. It's coming in hard, and I'm like, oh man, this is a really bad scene. I remember even saying to the gentleman running the PA, who I don't remember what his name was, I was like, dude, I don't know if you should keep going because like, you got water on the floor. Yeah. And he actually said to me, he goes, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's a wireless mic." I was like, the mic may be wireless, but I assure you the PA in the speakers are not.
Yeah.
And the next gentleman took the stage and he started going. He got 2 minutes in and there was a loud pop and the PA went out and everyone boogied out of that place.
Oh no. Did you have a good set before it was canceled?
I had a good set before it was canceled. I
Okay.
went to bed. Everyone wanted to go to a bar, and I was going to a bar with them. As, by the way, as it felt like a bucket was being poured on my head, which is not news to any of you New Yorkers. You were all there. You witnessed this, but it was crazy. It was a bucket of water just being perpetually poured over your head.
Okay.
And I said, a little voice in my head said, "Dude, don't go to a bar. You gotta go figure out your night." So I went back to the car and I called my wife, and she's on all the apps. She's on the weather app. She's on Waze and Google Maps and everything. And she's looking and she's seeing alert, alert. And she's like, "Give me your exact location." I tell her the street and the exact block I'm on.
Okay.
And she can see that flooding is happening all around me. And she says, "I think you need to get out of Brooklyn right now."
Is that on a driving app? Like driving apps are able to say what's flooded?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
The
cool.
real-time driving apps, they'll tell you about road hazards and the whole 9 yards.
You are on an island, Michael Regilio.
I was on an island in
Fuck
a
off.
hurricane. And
Okay.
so she's like, I was like, "I think I'm going to spend the night in the car." And she was like, "I think you're going to drown if you spend the night in the car.
Yeah.
I think you need to get out of there." So with her on multiple apps and on the phone the whole time, I'm heading down this street. She's like, "No, don't go down the street. It's flooded out. Take a left, take a left, take a right, take a right, take a left." It took me an hour to try and get out of Brooklyn. And anyone that was there knows that it was insanity. But man, broken down cars everywhere, trucks pulled over. And it seemed to me the problem was that the sewer caps were coming off the sewers. They were blasting off the sewers. And then cars were hitting these open sewers at full speed or even 20 miles an hour, and their tires were blowing out.
Okay.
I swear to you, I saw 60, 70 car accidents that night between New York and Philly. So finally, somehow I get out of Brooklyn and I get on the Verrazano Bridge. I'm like, okay, I think I'm getting there. And then no, Verrazano shut down. It puts me on Staten Island. Staten Island is even somehow worse than Brooklyn. There's just cars and flooding and rivers everywhere. And I've got my wife on the phone. I said, "Look, there's a Target parking lot. It doesn't look like it's flooded. I'm going to go sleep in the car." She said, no. Let's try this one last thing. I see a route that I think will get you back out. And we snake around. I mean, I'm going down streets. I'm stopping. I'm going, "Nope, that's a lake. Turn around, go back. Nope, that's a lake. Turn around, go back." Finally, I get out onto the Korean War Veterans Highway. All the lights are out. Not another car on the road other than unfortunate souls pulled over on the side with their having trouble.
Yeah.
And somehow, I don't know how, because I got back to Philly that night. We turned on the news the next day and we saw what had happened the night before. And everybody was like, "How did you get from Brooklyn to Philadelphia in that?" And I don't know.
Even on that highway, like, do you think that the seas parted for you from some divine intervention? Like, how the hell were they broken down? And then did you see that highway you made it out of was later flooded or no?
Yes, in fact, it was. I was on 95 South, and that became completely flooded probably an hour after I traveled it to get back to Philly. So,
Dude,
and as far as the divine intervention, I started to think that I was the divine, that it was the seas were parting not for me, but because of me.
Follow me, New Yorkers. But I love that you had a spotter in the form of your wife on the phone and the apps.
I know. Yeah, that was the divine intervention. Actually, that was the voice from the heavens, and that was her voice coming over the car stereo the whole time.
So yeah, I think one time the closest I can think is that when I moved to New York City, we were lost in Jersey. Like, we couldn't get back. I mean, hey, we've had a hotel in New Jersey. We were going back into New York, and we couldn't find our way back to the New Jersey hotel. And it's like I didn't have any fucking technology at all. So I'm there with my sister and brother-in-law in Illinois, being like, "Dude, get on the internet and show me how the fuck to get out of here." Because like if you don't have the technology, man, but it sounds like your wife is fully equipped, man. I mean, I hope you paid her back somehow. I hope you gave her a foot rub or something like that.
Lots of foot rubs. You nailed it. Actually, that is the currency. That is the currency in our home, is foot rubs. Yeah, but it was man.
So your takeaway was, I love this. The Michael Regilio takeaway is, I am the divine intervention.
Hey, I'm an entertainer. You can't do this job without having an insane ego. Just own it. Play into it.
But I love that you're like, okay, well, there's a creative itch. I can scratch it somehow. But I mean, is there anything from the successful rock life that you've kind of, like funneled into your comedy career, either marketing or act content wise?
No, actually, I mean, yes and no, in that
Okay.
I do still play in sort of a band with a very famous comedy writer by the name of Dino Stamatopoulos, who
Okay.
was he was the head writer on Mr. Show. He wrote for Letterman, Conan. Then he had his own show called Moral Oral, which is what he's sort of really known for. Actually, what he's really known for is he played Starburns on Community,
Okay.
and he and I have a band, which is I don't want to. He doesn't like it when I call it a comedy band because but it's coming out of his brain, so it can't help but
Is he the
be a bit.
lyricist?
What's that? Yeah,
Is
he
he the
is the
singer
lyricist.
lyricist?
He's the
Okay.
singer, rhythm guitarist, and lyricist.
Yeah, who's gonna
And
show up to those shows except comedy fans? Well,
exactly, I mean, it's all comedy fans that show up. And as of late, the first bunch of shows we did, I really just wanted to play guitar and just be a
okay.
musician in it. But then when we started having like opening acts and things like that, and I was watching other comics, I couldn't help myself. I was like, "Hey, I want to open the show. I want to do 10 minutes." I was
Okay.
actually we just did one with Ron Lynch, who's a phenomenal comedy actor.
Okay.
You know him from everything from Bob's Burgers to Home Movies,
Okay.
and he worked it in where the band opened the show and we played some shows, and then he did a bit where he was like, "You guys are kind of talentless. Do any of you do anything else like that's worth anything?" I was like, "Well, I have a few jokes I could tell, Ron." He's like, "Get up here and tell some jokes." So like we'd worked the whole bit out already, but yeah.
Dude, I love that. And so, I mean, I mean, as far as the dichotomy between New York and LA, what can you see as far as the writing and the performance? Is LA all performance and New York is all content? Like, it draws two different types of people, right? Like, why did you choose LA to pursue your comedy and rock dreams instead of New York?
Well, I mean, LA kind of chose me
Okay.
for music, and then I was
Okay.
just here when the comedy bug finally bit me hard.
Okay.
But yeah, like so many young guys, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do, and somebody said, "We're moving to LA. You want to go?" And just it was actually during a snowstorm on April 1st in Boston, Massachusetts. I was walking to a bar with my buddy, and he goes, "You know who the April Fools are? Us. Why do we live somewhere that it snows on April 1st?" It's like,
Okay.
let's get out of here, man. Let's move
Did
to
you
LA.
did you take a car?
No, he ended
Did
up
you get on a
taking.
fucking plane? Like that's just so ridiculous to me that I took a car. Like it's like I had a used Porsche from CarMax, but like I didn't have to drive cross country. Like the buddy I moved there with, like my co-poet at the time, like he didn't drive at all. So I drove the 16, 17 hours, whatever the fuck it is. It's like I didn't need to do that if I had, get on a fucking plane. And so if you guys weren't gonna, I guess, it makes sense to take a car with you cross country to use in LA, but it's nice that you used a plane, huh?
Yeah, well, I mean, for one, the cars you buy in LA, it's a little hint. The used cars are better because they don't go through winters. So you wouldn't want to take a car from the East Coast to LA anyway, because the used cars
Ah,
out here are a little bit higher.
okay.
But it's almost like a story, a success story, except for the success part. But I did get on a plane with
Okay.
$60 in my pocket and landed
Wow.
in LA and somehow made it work. Now,
Yes. So
normally
yeah,
when you hear that story, people go, "And look at me now. I showed up here with nothing. And now look at me. I'm getting an Oscar or a Grammy or whatever." I don't
so how'd you
have
do
that
it?
part of the story yet, but I do have the part of the story that I'm still alive.
And so I mean, I guess what I did is we jumped on Craigslist. We found a place, Craigslist for the job, and I moved back, between Chicago and New York maybe 4 or 5 times. But like, yeah, what'd you do to kind of find that first job and find that first apartment with $60 to your name?
I slept in a dude's basement on an air mattress for 3 months.
In return for what services?
Yeah, I mean, it was, and just
Yeah, that's my
my first
non-answer answer.
I actually arrived in LA during a crazy heat wave. It was 120 degrees every day, which is really rare here. Less rare nowadays than it used to be, but
Okay.
and like my third day here, I just, I'm a spacey guy. I'm always thinking about stuff, fantasizing about stuff, working out stuff in my head. And I was walking down the street in LA and I walked into a cactus on 120 on my way to a job interview.
And
And
it broke open and it
it
quenched your thirst with all of its water inside, I guess.
No, all the little prickers went into my skin, but I couldn't turn back. Now I'm sweating. I'm hot. I've got prickers under my skin. I walked into a cactus and I had to go to a job interview. So
Wow. How'd you
that
score
was,
the job interview? Calling around or Craigslist or what'd you do? Just like wait tables maybe?
yeah, this was at a restaurant on
Okay.
Los Feliz Boulevard in Los Angeles, California.
They're like, you look the part, man. You got the cactus coming out of your face, man. I think the people
Yeah.
will love you. But yes, he just kind of did the weights, and I guess I would have been smart to do the same thing. But I graduated law school, so it's like, well, I got a buddy who will be a host or a busser or whatever first, and he got jobs within the weeks because they try you out there in New York City. But then it took me longer, and I got a legal job, and so it kind of worked out the way we thought it would. But yeah, waiting tables, if I was any good at it, man, that would have been the smart move.
Yeah, I mean, those early days for me in LA were just phenomenal. This city really can be magical for a young person. And, I got here, started a band, things started going well for us. We were on tour and getting noticed and putting out records and all that stuff. I went from being a total loser with no prospects in
Okay.
Boston to feeling like I was on top of the world in LA within
And that's where
six
you met
months.
your wife, right?
Yeah. And then I went back to feeling like a total loser a couple of years later, but I had a little
Okay.
respite there where I didn't feel like a total loser.
But did you meet your wife during that window because you're a big rock star, or no?
No, actually,
Okay.
she and I, we always talk about it. We're sure we must have been in the same rock clubs at the same time, but no, I met her actually at the Improv here in LA at a comedy show. She's a huge comedy fan, and she's a huge supporter
Nice.
of comedy, and she's a huge supporter of me, and that's just, I mean, I owe her the world. I mean, she gets it, and it's so rare, I found, in the world of romance when somebody really says, you got to do you. I get what you're going for. And I've just been head over heels in love with her since the night I met her.
Dude, I already like her because of the story where she played spotter for you during Hurricane Ida when you parted the seas.
Yeah,
Dude,
exactly.
well, we're gonna follow all these. I mean, just the bi-coastal and worldly tours of Michael Regilio. Michael Regilio one, Twitter. That's where I'll be retweeting your funny stuff. And then, of course, he's the most famous Michael Regilio on YouTube and Instagram. Michael Regilio, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, brother.